All right, I'll let everyone get settled in with their screens. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm gonna give it another minute or so to make sure I can get as many people in as possible from the very beginning. So we'll start in just another minute. Well, that sounds like a minute in my book. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Corrales, and I work in the Community Engagement Department of the Palm Beach County Library System. I'd like to welcome you all today to our month of May Read, Watch, Listen. If you've attended in the past, which I see a few familiar names there, welcome back. If this is your first time, thank you so much for joining us today. We have a really awesome group of colleagues from all over the library system here to share some really cool reading, watching, and listening recommendations. Keep in mind that everything recommended to you today is available to all library members for the low cost of free. I'll go ahead and quickly introduce our guest, starting with my lovely co-host, Jessica Calloway, who's currently at the Glades Road branch. She is subbing as my co-host for Chris Jankow, who you might know. He's unable to come today, so she came to my rescue, and she's going to help me out with some behind-the-scenes stuff. Thank you, Jessica. We also have JP from Boca, Nicole also from Boca, Brianna from Green Acres. Elton is unable to make it today, but I will be sharing his recommendations for him. We have Stephanie from Wellington. She's currently at West Boynton. We have Jennifer from Jupiter. Michael also unable to make it, but Jessica will be helping out with his recommendations. Lindsey Mcmullen from Community Engagement as well with me. And our special guest from admin is Aurora Arthe, who is our assistant library director. So I think we can go ahead and get started with Jessica and her read selection, Fool by Christopher Moore. Go ahead, Jessica.
So this is one of my all-time favorite books. It is pretty much Shakespeare's King Lear from the Fool's perspective. Everything that happens in the play, the exact same events happen in the book, but you just get a lot of humor and what it would be like if the fool was the one that was pulling everybody's puppet strings behind the scenes. It's funny, it's lyrical, it's just absolutely ridiculous. It's a very enjoyable read that I love so much. And even though it is a Shakespearean, based off of a Shakespearean play, it was just so much fun to read. And I feel like it was a little easier because it was told as a story rather than a play. So I highly, highly suggest it.
Thank you so much, Jessica. We'll go next with, Crazy Rich Asians. And JP, go ahead and tell us a little bit about this.
Well, when the book first came out in 2013, I was kind of hesitant to read it. And then a lot of my friends were like, you should read it, you would love it. So I was like, okay, might as well read it. And then as I was reading the book, I was like, this sounds very, very like how I grew up, because it's more about tradition, family, cultural backgrounds and acceptance. So and it's still ongoing up until now. I mean, I have family members that still, before they get married, their significant other gets tested by family members or friends, like what's his background, what's her background. So, I mean, if you like that kind of book, if you like Amy Tan, if you like Gail Tsukiyama, Lisa C., it's in the same category where it pretty much is about family, tradition, acceptance, and just tradition and cultural background.
Wow, that's so good to hear. I mean, it's crazy to hear that. Or actually, it's really heartwarming to hear that it's a book that, you know, it's the culture you grew up in and you can relate to it. So they didn't do it a disjustice for you. I think that's really great. I know a lot of people around in where I'm at in the library system have read it before. Lindsey, I know, including, who's also on this call. I know she read this one. Okay, next up, thank you so much, JP. Next up, I think right next to you, we have Nicole. Hi, Nicole. Tell us a little bit about this book.
All right, so You Love Me by Caroline Kepnes. It's the third book in the You series, which is that very famous, popular TV show on Netflix. It's following Joe Goldberg, who's a little nutty, and once he finds a girl, he becomes attached and very obsessed with her. So in this one, he has his new victim, who happens to be a librarian. So we just follow him and we see the kind of growth from book 1, book 2 to book 3. And what I really liked about this is we don't have the TV show for season 3 just yet. So we kind of went off on, we're kind of ahead of what the TV show is doing. So, but it's super good. Joe is one of those characters that you hate that you love him so much, but like you're rooting for the bad guy. But there's just something about him that kind of just draws you in, which with the title, You Love Me, like it's no longer like, you know, like little like you or hidden bodies. It's like You Love Me, like it's a direct thing, which kind of drew me into the book too. But the series is really good and it's even better than the TV show, which we also married too. So I definitely recommend it.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Nicole. I loved the series so much. I binge watched it the second it came out. I loved it so much. And I need to get my hands on this because I want to know what happens in season 3. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. Next up, we have Brianna with Felix Ever After. Hi, Brianna.
Hi. Okay, so I picked this book just to give you a little summary. It's about this transgender teen named Felix, and he's just grappling with self-identity while he's going to like a boarding school in New York. And so he's grappling with his self-identity and falling in love for the first time. And all while this is happening, he's trying to figure out who's like cyberbullying him online because someone's anonymously just like attacking him, and then someone started bullying him in school as well, but he couldn't figure out who it is. So it's a bit of like a mystery, but also like it's a bit of a like fluffy like romance. And I don't normally go for books like this, but if you want something that's kind of like heartwarming, I do recommend it. It's a really good read.
I love that. I really like any kind of mystery that's like behind the screen. I think I first watched something like that with Gossip Girl. It's like, who's doing it? And Pretty Little Liars, who's doing that? But this is I think this is really wonderful because it's like a mix between someone, you know, young, finding themselves, and also the mystery like drags you in. Thank you so much, Brianna. Okay, next up. Yes. Oh, next up, it's my turn with Elton's suggestion was Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. He wrote me a little bit to talk about this. I didn't read this book personally, but he did, and he really liked it. So this book caught Elton's attention after watching several viral hit videos from the author's series. Emmanuel Acko does a great job of bringing the everyday conversations of race and racism to the table. Not the wordy or judgmental conversations, but the relevant stuff that show up among neighbors and friends. The author takes on all the questions Americans are afraid to ask, large or small, trivial or taboo. His video series, a phenomenon, but his book really dives into the conversation in a way that leverages everyone reading. I hope Elton watches this so I can thank him for this recommendation. Thank you, Elton. And next up, we have Stephanie with Say Nothing. Hi, Stephanie.
Hello. Okay, so this book, Say Nothing by Patrick Radden Keefe, is about the Troubles in Northern Ireland. It's it was a civil war, but it's never like really categorized by anyone as a civil war. Everyone always calls it the Troubles. It was between Unionists, those who wanted to stay within the United Kingdom, and the Republicans, those who wanted to separate from the United Kingdom and unite with Ireland, the Republic. So it takes the book, the premise of the book is you read about the disappearance of Jean McConville, a mother of 10 in Belfast, but it really takes you through the times she was living in. She disappeared in 1972, so it's like right in the middle of the Troubles towards the beginning, and you get a kind of sense of like why people choose the positions that they choose, and you get it's really the way that the book came about was that Boston College had a project where they recorded people who were a part of it. So it's kind of like from primary sources. It gets really in depth. Of course, it can't cover everything, but it's a very good book. It's intriguing. At the center of it is the disappearance of Jean McConville, but it's so much more than that.
Oh, thank you so much, Stephanie. I know Chris wishes he could be here. He really likes this book. He had a lot to say about it. Unfortunately, I can't access his brain at the moment, but he was really excited about this book, and he enjoyed it too. So there's that. Next up, thank you, Stephanie, by the way, thank you. Next up, we have Jennifer with, sorry guys, with
They Called Us Enemy.
They Called Us Enemy. There it is.
So this book came out in 2019, and I feel like not enough people know about it. I chose this book because at least among some community members, there's this perception that graphic novels are not real books, quote unquote real books. And I think those people have not been able to experience some of the latest graphic novels that have come out, because that might change their opinion about what is considered real reading and not real reading. So They Called Us Enemy is by George Takei, and that name might sound familiar because George Takei was the actor that was on Star Trek for many, many years, the original Star Trek. He played the pilot, Hakuro Sulu, I believe. And right now he is just like a very, very prominent activist for equal rights. And this is his memoir about growing up in an internment camp during World War II. And I really enjoyed this book because it really opened my eyes to the experiences of Japanese Americans during this time. It's something that I learned about in school, but we never went in depth about it. And as an adult, you know, learning more about it and realizing what it was, I'm pretty much horrified that this is a part of our history. And he talks very, openly and honestly about, just all this anti-Japanese sentiment that was happening as soon as Pearl Harbor was bombed, and how people in his neighborhood were treated, and just how his family was taken without notice, with basically just a clothes on their back by the military, to a racetrack, the Santa Anita racetrack in California, and how they were tagged like they were, animals, and given a horse stall for a family of 5. and just the experiences he had there. And he stayed there for, I want to say it was like 4 to 5 years, and how he grew up there, and just the insane situation that they were forced to be in. All their financial assets were taken away. Their house was taken away by the government, just everything that they owned, anything they possessed. And it was just it was an emotional read. There was one scene that really got to me, which was after they had been released. And of course, at this point, they're living in poverty because the government has taken away everything that they owned prior to their incarceration. Where at one point, his father was working on a campaign for some politician, and Eleanor Roosevelt came into the office, and everyone wanted to shake her hand, and his father just walked out of the room. And when George asked him later on, like, why did you just walk out of the room? Why didn't you shake her hand? He's like, I can't shake the hand of the wife of the man who took my family and put them behind barbed wire fences. And it was just really, this is just such a good read. Even if you think you don't like graphic novels, I highly recommend you read this one because it would change your mind. It is a very, very emotional read, and it was done very well.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Yeah, I actually read one of my first graphic novels ever just in the last 2 years. And it really only takes like the first 2 pages just to get used to the way it's written and the images. And it turns into, you mentioned, like, you use the word scene when you're talking about a part of the book. And I think that's so beautiful because it is like you're reading and watching at the same exact time. And I think it's just a little bit more powerful to be able to see the images, and how I know this one has some really beautiful images in it. Yeah. Thank you so much. Next up, we have The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And Jessica, you're going to speak for Michael. You're going to tell us a little bit about it.
Yes. So I've actually read this author before. I read her D.C. Jones and the Six, and it was fantastic. So I was actually really excited when I saw Michael's pick for this book, because this is a book that's like glamorous. It's about scandal, the glitz and the glam. You have a actress, Evelyn, who in her very late years has finally decided to release her own memoir. And she chooses the magazine reporter Monique for the job, who isn't very well known in the journalism community, but for some reason, this is who Evelyn picked. So you learn about Evelyn's life from the 1950s all the way to the late 80s. And of course, it's all about the 7 husbands that Evelyn has along the way in Evelyn's life as she goes through ambition, friendship, great love. Like I said in the beginning, it's just glitz and glam, like everything you think that Hollywood should have.
Oh, I love that. I'm definitely going to read that one. That one keeps popping up on bestsellers lists that I see when I'm ordering for book club in a bag. So I might have to get that one. Thank you, Jessica, for sharing that. And thank you, Michael, if you watch this, for selecting this title. Very cool. Next up, we have Hench, and Lindsey's going to tell us a little bit about it.
So I brought my copy. I absolutely love this book. It has everything. It has office politics, it has supermax prisons, it has quantum mechanics, and it is also about superheroes and villains. And the main character of this book is Anna, and she is a temp, and she works for supervillains. She does data entry, social media manipulation, and she just sees it as a job, no better or worse than working for an oil company or something. And so she's a hench. Her henchwoman name, I guess, becomes the Auditor, which shows her background. And she has an unfortunate encounter with one of the biggest superheroes of the day, Super Collider, and it changes her life. She starts to see how truly dangerous superheroes are to society. This is kind of that new genre of superheroes aren't really that great and maybe cause more damage than they stop. So she has an unfortunate encounter with him, and it sends her on a journey, and she ends up working for the biggest villain in this world. And it's basically pretty awesome. It's hilarious and interesting. And if you love superheroes, if you don't love superheroes, if you always root for the villain, you will really enjoy this book. It is a wild ride, and it's actually her debut novel. This is the first novel she's ever written. So it is definitely worth a read.
Wow, thank you so much, Lindsey. Yeah, I am really into this type of superheroes are bad. I know there's a TV show I watched a couple episodes of. I can't remember what it's called right now.
The
off the top
Boys.
of
The Boys.
Yes, that one. That one. It's so good. It's so good. It's like an eye opener. Like, it goes into what I like to fixate on, which is like the destruction that superheroes cause. And I'm like, who's going to clean this all up?
She starts
Thank
a
you,
website
Lindsey.
and starts cataloging the destruction that they caused.
I love that. I love that so much. There's apparently a similar show called Invincible on Amazon. Thank you for sharing that in the chat. Okay, thanks, Lindsey. Next, we have Aurora with Doomsday Book by Connie Willis.
Okay, the Doomsday Book takes place at the University of Oxford in mid-21st century England, in a time that's very much like our own. And it also takes place in 1300s England. There is not one, but two pandemics in this book, one for each time period, and that run parallel throughout the book. The two time periods are tied to each other by a history student who travels back in time to study the Middle Ages. I first read this book about 20 years ago. It was originally written in 1992. And I remember that it was a great book, but I didn't remember all the details since it was so long ago that I read it. I recently picked it up and reread it again and was surprised by how many similarities this book has to our current pandemic situation. Everything from mask wearing to contact tracing and vaccinations are covered, and it really gave me a bit of a different perspective on our own pandemic situation. The one thing I really liked about this book is its depiction of life in the Middle Ages. It took the author 5 years to write this novel, and it's evident in the details that she works into the story. She really brings to life the Middle Ages, and the reader can really vividly imagine both the joy and the despair that are felt by the characters in the story. The author won both the Nebula and the Hugo Awards for this science fiction novel, and those awards are well deserved, so I highly recommend this book.
Wow, thank you so much, Aurora. I really appreciate that recommendation. It sounds really beautiful, actually.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much. Next up, we are getting into the watch. Before I get into that, guys, I have a few links that I keep randomly dropping into the chat box. They're just some links to today's list of recommendations, where you can find the recordings that we have. We've been keeping all the recordings since December. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, just making sure. I think I have a little background. All right, and I'm going to drop it again. And now we're going to get into the watch. First up, we have Jessica with Howl's Moving Castle, a personal favorite of mine. You ready, Jessica?
Yeah, I got kicked out on one thing. I'm sorry, guys.
I noticed. It's okay. I let you back in. All working well? You're muted.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Michelle, I just need you to co-host me so I can change the screen.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, guys. Technical difficulties.
I apologize.
Got it?
Good, thank you.
Okay.
All right, if you want to go back to my slide, I will tell you guys all about Howl's Moving Castle, which is my favorite movie of all time. It is a Studio Ghibli movie that has won my heart. It is whimsical, it is romantic, it is everything that I could possibly want in the movie. It's there. The pictures behind it are just wonderful. So it is the idea of Sophie, who is a hat maker, gets cursed to be like a little old woman, which I feel like I relate to. I like to stay home, drink my tea, read books. I'm not the most energetic person in her 20s. So I definitely feel like I have an old soul, so I'm able to relate to Sophie a lot. And it's just, everything about it is wonderful. Like I said, even the magic way, like the world, the way it's established, I highly suggest anyone. It's a book series as well. I have read the first one, and it's just, the book is just as great as the movie. It's both. The movie's not, it's not something I would say the book is better.
Thank you, Jessica. Yeah, I love this movie. I really do. It's so beautiful to just turn on, and just as you're watching, it's like you're there. It's like when the wind blows, you can almost feel the wind blow. It's so beautiful. What I love about the main character is she is more laid back and kind of calm, and they don't really ever try to change that too much, other than she becomes a little tougher, and I like that, but she still maintains that peaceful personality that is so relatable. Okay, let me go to the next one. We've got JP with A Walk to Remember.
Okay, so Walk to Remember, it's based on a book by Nicholas Sparks. It came out in 2002, and the book was written in 2000. So when I first saw this movie, I was like, oh, another Nicholas Sparks film. So I was like, I think I've read the book before. So I went back through my list, and I'm like, yes, I did. So when the movie came out, I was still in college at the time. So I was like, let's go and see the movie. So I went to see the movie, and I just fell in love with it. And my friend wanted to see it. I went back and went to see it again with him. So it's practically about Jamie and Langdon. It's set in 1990s. It's about two teenage in high school, and they met, they didn't like each other, and then they were pitted against in a play together, and then suddenly they start liking each other, and he finds out that she was ill, she was dying with cancer, and they started falling in love. She's the daughter of a pastor, and her father didn't want her to be involved with someone because he knew that he lost his wife too from the same disease, and he didn't want his daughter to suffer the same fate as he did when he lost his wife, and then he doesn't want the person that his daughter is going to end up marrying to suffer the same as he wants to suffer. But they persevere, end up getting married. Langdon pretty much made his daughter's life much more happier when she was towards the end of her life, and she did succumb to the disease towards the end. And it was actually, the book was written by Nicholas Sparks in honor of his sister. When he was writing it in 1999, his sister was suffering from the same illness as the main character was, and his sister was never failed to get to see the book ended because she did pass away before the book was released. And according to Nicholas Sparks, that he said that he loved the character so much of Jamie that he couldn't bear to give him, to make her die at the end of the book. But in the movie, they changed the timeline. In the book, it's in the 50s, and then they changed the timeline to the 90s in the film. So I still love this book up until now, or the movie, the same as well.
I mentioned to Chris that when I saw this pop up, I was like, oh no, I was instantly like flashbacks of the first movie I cried watching so badly. It's so heartbreaking and beautiful. And there are moments where it's just so funny and beautiful and just gorgeous. I love this movie. Thank you, JP. And Nicole, right next to you. Let's swap to yours. Forgetting Sarah Marshall, which is from sad to hysterical. Thank you. We're going to forget the sadness for a minute.
If you need something to perk yourself up after watching a walk to remember this is the perfect movie. It's my favorite movie of all time. No matter how I'm feeling, like sad or like angry, I put it on and it's just like, I'm already in a better mood. It's about a guy who's dating this girl for 5 years. She breaks up with him in like one of the most horrible ways. And he goes to Hawaii to try to forget about her. And he just goes through all the feels and everything. And it's amazing. The cast is great. You have Jason Segel, Russell Brand, Mila Kunis, Kristen Bell, Paul Rudd. I mean, you're in stitches the entire time. It's just so funny. It's in Hawaii. It's gorgeous. And then on top of it, it ends with a Dracula puppet musical. I mean, like, it doesn't get any better than that. So
I forgot about that. Yeah, I totally forgot about this is a really great movie. I think I went on like a whole weekend of just like rewatching it over and over again because it was so funny.
And then the soundtrack is odd. Like everything about the movie just works so perfectly well together. So I definitely recommend it.
I love it. Thank you so much, Nicole. Next up, we have Brianna with Bob's Burgers, another one. We're just gonna laugh off all the tears from A Walk to Remember.
Yeah, it took me a while to get into this show because I know it's more of like an adult animation. It's more geared toward older crowds, so I'm not really interested in things like that because they tend to be like more vulgar and inappropriate, which is like, I don't like when they like rely on that for comedy. But I eventually caved and started watching it, and it's not like that. It's really like silly and fun, and like it has like a lot of great puns, which is like all these dad jokes and puns, and it's like, I don't know, it just makes me really happy. It's just like a fun, goofy show, and it's just great. It works for like people of all ages.
It is definitely more wholesome dad joke humor. I love this one a lot. Some shows are good to like turn on and clean or watch TV, but this one I end up just sitting on the couch and just like I can't get back up and do anything. It's so funny. I love these.
I always intend to like multitask, but I can't.
Not with this one. This is not the one for multitasking. It's hysterical. Thank you, Brianna. Next up, we have Elton, who I will be subbing for. And his recommendation is His Dark Materials, the complete first season. This series Elton loved because it isn't your typical fantasy about a main character who wins her way through episodes. It's based on Philip Pullman's book series. It has a magical world with interesting elements of realism and controversy. It is an adventure with animal spirits, angels, and demons filled with twists, tragedies, and exciting journeys. A great time for anyone who loves adventure, but not too much violence. Oh, that's a nice one. Actually, really want to watch this. I love all this stuff. Anything fantasy. I love animal spirits. That sounds like my thing. All right. Thank you, Elton. When you watch this, thank you. Next, we have Stephanie with The Photograph.
Okay, so The Photograph stars Issa Rae and Lakeith Stanfield. This is like a really feel-good movie. The photograph in question is Issa Rae's her mother, who is a famous New York City photographer who has recently passed away, and Issa Rae's character is trying to deal with her mother's sudden death. She meets this reporter who is on assignment and who also comes across the photograph. So basically the movie is showing how that photograph came to be showing the mother's unfolding love story when she first starts out in Louisiana and how she makes her way to New York. And Issa Rae's character is a museum curator, so you also get to see her relationship unfold with Lakeith Stanfield's character, who is the journalist. It's really beautiful. It's very jazzy. The score, Robert Glasper, who's like a really famous jazz musician, he provided the score. So it sounds beautiful. It looks beautiful. It's just overall really feel-good movie.
Thank you so much. It looks really beautiful. I haven't seen it, but Lakeith, I think I told you before, he's one of my favorite actors. He has like such soulful eyes.
Yeah, he does.
He makes everything look very dreamy and almost sad. I love it. Thank you. And next up, Jennifer with, you're back in, with 12-Hour Shift.
Yes. So as you can see from all the blood on that picture, this is a horror movie. However, it's a funny horror movie. So it's about a woman who is a nurse, and she is working a double shift at the hospital. And all the shenanigans that happen during this double shift, because not only is she a nurse and working at the hospital, she is also on the side to make ends meet, selling organs from her patients. So it's really, it's very bloody, but it's very funny because everything goes wrong basically in this shift. Like somebody doesn't pick up the thing that they're supposed to pick up, and that leads to kind of a domino effect of things happening. Even if you're not normally a horror fan, because this is not a scary movie, there blood but not scary, bloody but not scary. So I would highly recommend it, because it just, for the funny factor.
Thanks, Jennifer. I think I mentioned in a previous read, watch, listen how much I love a little bit of violence and a little murder. So I think I'll definitely like this. Oh, and organs sound great to sell on the side. Thank you. Next up, we have Jessica. She's going to tell us a little bit about Michael's pick, Ex Machina.
This is another one of his picks that have been on my to-do list that I just haven't gotten to yet, but I do know a little bit about it. So Ex Machina is about a programmer, Caleb Smith, who creates this AI robotic body for Ava. So throughout the entire movie, Ava is kind of manipulating the people around her. She's trying to survive. I'm not exactly sure if she's the good guy or the bad guy yet, because I haven't watched it. But I do know at the end of it, she manages to kind of lock everybody up, and she puts like human skin over her mechanic parts so she can pretend to be a real human as she leaves the machine factory that she was built at. So it's action-y, it's artificial intelligence, that science fiction feel. So I highly suggest this for people who like science fiction.
Thank you, Jessica. And thank you, Michael. This one's really cool. I know I watched it a long time ago. Do you know when it came out? It didn't say.
2014.
Okay, yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, this one's really cool. Definitely. I love anything sci-fi, machines. I love it. Thanks, Jess. Next up, we have Aurora with Hunt for the Wilder People.
Okay, so Hunt for the Wilder People was directed by Taika Waititi, and it was actually released in 2016, but I just discovered it recently. This movie starts out as Ricky, who grew up in the city, is sent to his new foster family in the New Zealand countryside. Ricky is quite a character. He's a big hip hop fan. He recites his own haiku throughout the movie. And at the beginning of the movie, he's pretty defiant and he keeps trying to run away from home, but he never really gets very far. As he's settling in with his new foster family, who he refers to as his Aunt Bella and Uncle Heck, tragedy strikes and he is forced to go on a cross-country adventure, which actually turns into a manhunt with his Uncle Heck. This is one of my recent favorite movies. I just kept thinking back on this quirky movie for a very long time after watching it. It made me both laugh and cry, but I definitely ended up laughing a lot more than crying. The New Zealand scenery is just beautiful throughout the whole movie, and the message of family and friendship and growing up is just heartwarming and great. So I just highly recommend it for everybody.
Thank you so much, Aurora. I think Taika also did Jojo Rabbit, and we talked about that in another one, and everyone raved about how wonderful he is and how he's just like nails a good story. He really does. Thank you. All right. Next up is our listen round, and I'm going to go ahead and rest my voice and let Miss Jessica Calloway do some talking for me. Go ahead, take it away, Jessica.
Thank you. I don't know if I will be as riveting as Miss Michelle has been, but I will try. So for the listen, the next one that we have is Shogun. And this is my pick, and I absolutely I recommend this to everybody. It is definitely a large book, which is why I listened to it originally through audiobook. But I love listening to books in audio that take place in different countries. And this specific novel takes place in Kyoto, Japan, where we have John Blackthorne gets lost at sea, and he is now stranded in Japan. And they consider him a heretic because his religion is different, his politics are different, just everything about him is different than what their customs are. So throughout the entire novel, Blackthorne is learning the language, the way women run the households, like the entire customs are just, they're so different. One thing that I was really surprised about as I was listening to is the fact that like women control the money in the household in feudal Japan, and that's not something I would expected in that culture, but I was really surprised by it. I also love listening to books that take place in different countries because the pronunciation of the names, the places, how they sound, I like listening to this, like I really got the Japanese words, like I really felt like I was in Japan, being surrounded by the words and the language and just the way that they were pronounced in the audiobook. So I highly suggest it. Okay, so next we are going to go to JP. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, but I have not listened to this one, so I'm excited to see what you have to say.
Well, as we know, if you're a big Star Wars fan, it's a very, very vast, huge world of Star Wars. You know, you have the canon, and then you have the vast majority that's out of it. So Revan is one of the famous characters in the series of Star Wars that's not part of the film series. And he is a Jedi who was turned into a Sith without him knowing about it. So it's set in the Old Republic. So this is prior to the film, you know, prior to Clone Wars. And if you've known about the Clone Wars. So he's one of those famous characters who is very interesting in the way that he turned into the dark side while fighting for the Jedis and realized that he was turned and then went back into it, the Jedi, to correct all of his mistakes to save his family. He's married to another Jedi who is also a famous Jedi in the world of Star Wars. So if you listen to this audio or if you've ever picked up the book or to read, it practically gives you the insight of what life was like during that time before Emperor Palpatine was still involved in the politics and, you know, the world of the Star Wars lore. So, I mean, Revan is a very, very interesting series, and the audio itself, the voice acting in this one is really, really good. And Drew Carson himself has written a lot of the Star Wars lore that's prior to existence of the films. He did Darth Bane as well, which is another famous Sith Lords in the character lore of the Star Wars world.
I'm always a sucker for a good story of redemption if people fix the mistake. So that definitely sounds like something I would read.
Yes.
And then I think up next we have Nicole with the music CD Let Love Rule by Lenny Kravitz. I just like it.
All right, so I chose Let Love Rule. It's his autobiography. He actually reads it. He actually reads the audiobook, which is really, really cool. It has such a like laid back feel to it. It kind of feels like you're almost at like a like those cafes and like they have like the guy like reading poetry and stuff. Like his voice is just so soulful, and it's just so relaxing to like just listen to like on your lunch break. He's such a cool guy, and to me he like has such a mysterious like look to him and stuff that you really don't know much about him. So like it was interesting to like hear about his life from him and everything. And I didn't know he had a famous mother. He doesn't seem like the kind of like celebrity that came from, you know, that kind of life, but he's just super chill, super cool. He does a little singing on there, and like there's so many little stories about Hollywood, and it's actually really, really small. Like all the people know everybody. So I thought it was really interesting. I'm not really into nonfiction, but just to hear it straight from his mouth and like just the way he talks and the way he talks about women, which is like one of the most nicest things I've ever heard someone talk about. Like he has such utter respect for women, and I just like it made me fall in love with him even more. But I definitely recommend it if and then listen to his music too.
He sings, does he play an instrument with it, or is he just sings with his voice?
Yeah.
All right, this is really cool. And then I think we have up next is Brianna with Clap When You Land.
Great. This book is actually, to explain the title just a little bit, it's a lot of people who are from like Caribbean islands, and this one takes place in the Dominican Republic. Whenever people fly home, usually from like New York, and they go back home to like their island, they usually clap when they land because they're just so excited to be back home in their motherland. So there's a little like history on like why some people do that. And this book is kind of based on a flight that happened about 2 months after 9/11, where it crashed on the way to the Dominican Republic, and a lot of people, I think almost everyone died on that flight. So it was a huge tragedy within the community. A lot of people in New York and on the island lost somebody that they knew. So it was just like a huge tragedy that wasn't really talked about because it was around the time of 9/11. So this book is about two sisters that both lose their father. One's in New York and one's in the Dominican Republic. And they learn about each other's existence because they both lost their father on the flight. So it's just about their grief and their acceptance and just like missing their father, but also like having to deal with like the truth that like he hid from them all these years. It's a really good book, and the author reads it, and I love listening to her voice. And it's actually a book in verse, so it's all poetry, and it's just like I don't know how she does it, but it's like a great way to like hear the story.
And I just realized that she wrote Poet X, which I love. So I have a feeling I would.
Yeah, I love that one too. I love her books. She's great.
I have to add it to my to-do list.
Mm-hmm.
And then next, we're going to tell Mr. Elton.
Oh, yes. Okay. Right. Elton chose The Bridge, it's a music CD by Sonny Rollins. Sonny Rollins was one of the most widely acknowledged tenor saxophone players in the world. This album is the perfect set of musical numbers for chaotic days that need a sense of calmness. I've been having a lot of those. This connected to Elton as a saxophone player who's always looking for background music for busy days. The bridge was recorded in 1962 as a nod to the stories that Rollins had spent practicing by himself on the Williamsburg Bridge in Brooklyn, New York. It's one of his most dramatic recordings. He's got plenty of other albums available in our catalog and on Hoopla as well. So Elton recommends this. I listened to a little bit of it. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. It's like I can fall asleep to it.
I know. I work with Elton, so I know he likes a lot of jazz. So this is what he picked out of everything.
Yep. This is a very Elton pick.
Okay, I think Stephanie, you're up next.
Okay, so Ungodly Hour is the second album by sisters Chloe and Hallie. The sisters basically do pretty much everything on this album. They write, they sing on it, they produce. They're just all around so talented. They're also actresses. They're on the show Grownish. So they're just multi-talented. And they're very young too, I think 22 and 20. This album kind of reminds me of Destiny's Child, which makes sense because they are signed to Beyonce's label. It's just very fun. It's pop, it's R&B, it's upbeat. It's like a lot of like girl power anthems. It's just a really fun album to listen to. It's like a very summer vibe, even though I'm not sure. It came out in 2020. I don't know if it came out in the summer, but it has a very summery vibe to it.
I've never heard of them, so I looked them up when I saw them, and I started watching like clips of Grownish. So I was like, oh, okay, I can get behind it.
Yeah, they're amazing. Their performances are they're really amazing.
All right, I think up next we have Jennifer with her pick, 7 Fallen Feathers.
Okay, so 7 Fallen Feathers, I listened to this as an audiobook, and it's a investigative book by an investigative reporter who is indigenous to Canada area. And basically she is, through this entire book, in a broad sense, she's talking about racism and human rights violations that have been committed by the Canadian government against Indigenous communities. In a more specific sense, she is focusing on 7 students, the 7 Fallen Feathers, who died within an 11-year period while attending school in Thunder Bay, Ontario. It is just like, whoa. This is another book where it was just a very emotional book that, really focuses in about, why these children died, why they didn't have to die, and how there was such failure on the part of the justice system to investigate these deaths, and how the children being Indigenous is basically what led police to not investigate, or to put such little effort into investigation that it was never truly solved. And it was just really, really interesting. I had no idea that Canada shared the same history as far as how they have treated Native Americans as the United States has had. And a lot of all these troubles, stem from colonialism. It stems from the Indian schools that were put up. And I had always been under the impression that, Indian schools where they they would forcibly take children from their families to raise them up to be civilized. It's just, I was under the impression that that happened a long time ago, like a long time ago. And was very wrong. Like the last school, I think, only shut down in the 90s. So all these schools were like not good places. They were, once again, these children were forcibly taken from their parents, and they suffered horrible abuse at these schools. Horrible abuse. I'm not even going to go into it because it was just so bad. And then these children, once they got out of the school, after having endured so much trauma, you know, a lot of them were suffering from mental issues, physical issues, and, you know, never got the actual education that they were supposed to have at these schools. So, you know, no way to find jobs, and how that turned into a generational trauma, you know, because they went on to have families, and, you know, those children went on to have their children, how all these things were passed forward. And it is just like heartbreaking. She, I don't remember like the numbers, but she really goes into like the statistics of how far behind Indigenous children are in their education as opposed to children in other communities, and how they're just, you know, not prepared to be out in the world, and how, you know, they have grades like you could be from kindergarten all the way to high school, and in these far rural communities, there's only one building for, you know, that many children. They don't have enough school supplies, textbooks, teachers, you know, just because of the location. And, you know, it's just, it was a lot. It was very educational though. I highly recommend it. I highly recommend it as an audiobook, because obviously this is an Indigenous, if I haven't said it before, this is an Indigenous author. So she has a personal stake in what she is talking about. And to hear, you know, in her voice, you know, just how passionate she is about this subject, and how, you know, kind of righteously angry about the indignities that her people have faced, the various tribes in that area have faced. It really comes across, and, you know, it really made me do more outside research after reading this, and, you know, learning more about the history of Native American communities here in the United States, and then Indigenous communities in Canada. And just, yeah, it was definitely an eye-opener. I feel like I've had a recent month of reading books that go into the past and, you know, reveal things that I wasn't taught in school, or never went in depth with in school, and showing me how things that happened, you know, 100 years ago or even 50 years, you know, reverberate to this day. So very, very good book. Highly recommend it.
Okay, so very powerful. Like, I can understand why wanting to listen to audiobook, especially nonfiction with so much information and stuff.
Yes.
Sounds very, very powerful. So that sounds interesting. I'll look it up. Okay. Next, we have Michael's book, The Nation of Plants, and I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about him. I had not heard anything about this book before until he input it, so I'm kind of excited to learn a little bit more about plants. It is a natural history nonfiction book that talks about the 8 fundamental pillars on which the life of plants rests, and how it's from the perception of neurobiologists, several plant neurobiologists, which I did not know was a thing until now, and how the most important and widespread powerful nation of Earth finally gets to speak. Like an attentive parent, plants, after making it possible for us to live, have come to our aid once again, giving us their rules. So it pretty much talks about the universal rights of living beings written by plants. So that sounds very testing, definitely something I would want to listen to. I have a feeling there'd be a lot of words that I'd want to hear how they're pronounced, scientific words of how they're pronounced. So thank you, Michael, for letting us know more about this. And I hope you all, if you're interested in plants, this is definitely the way to go. So after that, we now have Lindsey Mcmullen to tell us about her book, Deadly Education.
Okay, I love this book. It's a little hard to describe. I actually pitched it to Chris when I was recommending it as Hogwarts on steroids. This is book 1 of a planned trilogy. Book 2 is coming out late in September if you're interested. But it is basically, the world building in this is so interesting. It's about magical children and a whole magical world, but instead of going off to Hogwarts and having adventures and making friends, their only hope is to get shipped off to the Scholomance, which is not an evil school, but is a school in a void with only one door. They can only come in and out on graduation day, so they don't get to ever leave the school for 4 years. And this is protecting them. Apparently in this world, wizard children are very vulnerable to these evil monsters that kind of roam the world, feeding on them. If they make it to adulthood, they're strong enough to be safe, but the best minds of this wizarding world, all they could come up with to protect their children was to create a school that is sentient. There are no teachers, there are no adults, it's just these kids. And they basically have to fight for survival and form alliances. And the main character, her name is Galadriel, yes, from Lord of the Rings. She goes by Elle. And everyone in this world has different affinities for magic. Her affinity is for mass destruction, which makes it hard for her to make friends and allies. And if you plan on graduating from the Scholomance, you need to have allies and you need to form a team, because you basically have to fight your way through a horde of evil monsters to get to the graduation doors. So book 1 is basically her struggles to have friends and deal with life while basically struggling for survival every day. And it is not as grim and dark as I'm making it sound, but it is an awesome book. It does end on a tiny bit of a cliffhanger, no spoilers. So you might want to wait to pick it up until the end of September when book 2 comes out. I got an advanced copy of book 2. It ends on an extreme cliffhanger, so beware, readers or audiobook listeners. And I did like the narrator of this audiobook. She did a really good job. Kind of, you hear the way she enunciates Elle's thoughts and what she says, and I love the accents and everything. So this is a fantastic book, and I highly recommend it. It's a wild ride.
This has been on my to-do list. So I've been super excited. But
Yes.
I'm glad the cliffhangers, because sometimes I have a hard time waiting.
I hate cliffhangers.
All right. And then in our final round, and here strong, we're going to have Aurora with her item Strange Trails.
Okay. Well, I discovered this album about 2 years ago, and I have listened to it I don't know how many times, but every time I listen to it, I discover something new. So at first listen, Strange Trails by the indie folk band Lord Huron, it might sound like just a lot of catchy tunes that you can hum along to, but when you start listening a bit closer to the words, you realize that there's really a dark element that runs through this album. The supernatural is present in most of the songs, and actually death is a theme throughout. And I know that doesn't sound very uplifting or anything, but it is really not morbid. It just ends up being very thought-provoking. A lot of the lyrics are very interesting and really make you think. Then when you really start listening to the words and you really start paying attention, you realize that each song has a narrator and it's actually telling a story. And there's actually a connection that runs through all of the songs where a lot of the themes and characters are repeated. So I did a little bit of research because I am a librarian, and I realized that the lead singer, I read an interview by the lead singer that said that the idea of the whole album was conceived as a movie. So they wrote the album and are hoping to actually make it into a movie. So I really hope that does happen because it's a really interesting album and the songs will stick with you. So I highly recommend it. Thank you.
Sure. And then Michelle, I'm going to pass it back to you to wrap it up in your wise words.
Okay. Thank you so much, guys. This was so much fun. And remember, second Wednesday of every month, you can come and join us and we can talk about movies. And remember, we can always chat in the chat box. If you like something, let us know. I dropped some links again in there. I think I dropped it like 10 times, but you can leave a survey. You can get a list of all the recommendations we had today. And we really hope to see you guys next time on June 9th. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you everyone for your recommendations. Bye-bye.